The goal for this is just to simply show you guys what it actually takes to make a music video in 6 hours. Welcome to the Creative Block, where we talk about what it's like and what it takes to work full-time in the creator economy. My name is Nick Friend, and today we're doing a breakdown of some behind-the-scenes footage that I shot for a music video here in Nashville, Tennessee. So let's go over to my desk, which is right here, and we're going to review some of the footage. All right, so we're just going to go chronologically. We're going to start with the beginning of the day, and we're going to move all the way to the end of the day. And there were 3 setups that we had for the production. So first things first, we open up with our intro scene, which is Talent, which is Zoya in the car, which was a rented like classic Mercedes with a camera mounted on the hood. So with this setup, obviously safety is a big concern. So you want to use as much safety equipment and as much mounting equipment as you can manage given your production level. And for this one, obviously this is a very, very small production. There's only 3 people on the crew, and there's only 1 person shooting behind the scenes as like a helper. That was me. Obviously we don't have like a ton of gear to throw around. So we had one really, really big suction mount that we mounted to the hood of the car, and then we used some ratchet straps to keep it as safe as we possibly could. Fortunately, this worked out perfectly. I would actually use more mounting, and I would do what I could to try to find like more little suctions like this, which I got off of eBay for like 30 bucks, but they do a really good job of like supplementing the main gear that you already have. While this did work, it was a little sketchy. And here you can see Bryce sort of dialing in the camera. We shot this on an A7 IV with Sony native glass and a little bit of filtering from the Polar Pro matte box system. You can also see in this footage that he has the DJI SDR transmission system hooked up to this camera. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. This is Ryan. She's our director. This is Zoya. You can see she's dressed for the part. She is Talent. This is also a music video for her. It's a song that's coming out shortly. Here we get a good view of what the actual camera rig was and the suction mount that it's hooked up to on the hood of the car. And this is after we've been driving around a little bit. The suction mount held really well. Bryce also did a really great job of just making sure that it was always ready to go and that it was safe and secure. We probably checked it every 3 to 5 minutes to make sure that it was not losing suction, or if it was losing suction, we got that suction back just by like resetting the mount. With the DJI SDR system, the reason that Breakbread decided to use that system was mainly because of its stability over longer distances, because we basically had a chase car. He had the director in the passenger seat. She was monitoring on the clamshell. And because there was such a big distance, something like Hollyland Mars system just didn't have the reach that we needed for the signal to be reliable between the hero car and the chase car. And that's why we went with the SDR system. So then we moved into this new setup, which was actually on a bridge. Fortunately, the owner of the property actually let us drive that beautiful classic car, like right up onto this bridge. We got really, really unique perspectives of the car on the bridge with Talent, which you don't typically get. Access to this was really, really fortunate because Bryce has a good relationship with the owner of the property. That's going to be a recurring theme in this breakdown, which is just leveraging the relationships that you have with the people that you want to collaborate with. So people that have really awesome locations that they have access to, people that have really awesome gear, people that have really awesome studio spaces. Those sort of relationships go a super, super long way when you're trying to do stuff this quick and for this little money. This is basically, for all intents and purposes, this is a passion project for everyone involved, including myself. To that note, like, it's all about making sure that the people you're collaborating with are getting something out of it as much as you are. For Bryce and for Break Bread, they got this incredible location to produce content out of. And then the location, they now have an asset that they can show off, say, hey, come to our location. You can make stuff like this. Here's what we've done in the past. So it's a bit of a reciprocal relationship between the production company and the location. Here we are sort of planning out the shots, looking at how we can light it to make it look a certain way. Also right here, I showed a few stills that I have from the production because I was shooting video behind the scenes as well as stills behind the scenes. I highly recommend that. And also, if you haven't, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because we make breakdowns like this fairly often. Right here, you can see that we're going through another take of like the whole song. We pretty much ran through the song every single time. We didn't really shoot in segments. And the reason we did that was for coverage reasons, because we didn't have a lot of time at each location. Like I said, we shot this entire music video in 6 hours. We had to sort of make the most of each situation. And with that in mind, we decided to run the whole song whenever we had a new setup. And this was probably the 2nd or 3rd setup of this location, probably the 6th setup overall. The way that Bryce lit this scene was really clever because what he did was he took a battery powered light, and he actually rigged it up on a combo stand to look like a street lamp. So what we were able to do was not only shoot on a really interesting bridge with a really interesting background, just by using one battery powered lamp with like a tiny little like 2-foot wide softbox, we were able to create a look that is very, very close to what like a tungsten or halogen like street lamp would look like in this situation. And then we used one tube light just to sort of augment the situation so it didn't look too contrasty or too dark, and we could fill in the sort of the details of our talent and the car. Once we were finished on the bridge, we very quickly moved over to a studio setup. This is where Bryce leveraged really awesome relationship that he has with a studio local to Nashville. Here's what he had to say about that.
The cool thing about having a studio is sometimes they have lights already pre-installed in the grid, and you have more access to gear in a different way. Plus, it's just more convenient to have a cyc wall, because then I can not worry about like what's in the background. It's more, I can control it a lot more. So that's why I do it in the studio. A lot of times, studios just want you to use the space, so it's always worth talking to them before you see the price, because you'd be surprised how many folks just want to help you create, especially in Nashville.
Bryce uses this space as a storage unit for all of the equipment that he has, which is twofold in its approach. So one, it keeps all of his equipment safe, because we've all been there when like we either lose gear gets stolen, or gear gets broken, and we don't have a solution about how to replace that equipment. For whatever reason, it happens. Second off, it develops a twofold relationship between Bryce and the studio, whereas he is allowed to use the studio as he sees fit, and the studio gets a bunch of equipment that they can then rent out to other clients. So it's very reciprocal in its nature. Again, like the location gets something out of the relationship just as much as the producer or director does as well. So it has to be like a handshake between you and the people you collaborate with. And so we basically set up this car in this studio. There's a big old cyc wall. It is big enough to hold like a full-size car, which was really convenient. And we were able to use the space as much as we wanted. They have a grid set up with a bunch of lights that are controlled via an app. Bryce was playing around between like some blue colors as well as some tungsten colors. I think we ended up just striking those colors all together, and we went with some practical lights with like the headlights of the vehicle. We also rigged up a bunch of tube lights so they had like a bit of a gag on them so that it looked like we were driving through street lamps, and we tried that for a little while. I think ultimately the effect was a little bit too sourcey. You can see here how the lights are sort of strobing, and what that allowed for was to get a little bit more dimension, a little bit more depth. It ended up not working. I think the director ended up going in a slightly different direction and made it a little bit more dreamlike, a little bit less based in reality, which I think was a really cool decision to go for. You have to work fast and you have to work cheap. So you got to be able to like pivot on a dime right away and not really worry too much about consequences. You have to have confidence in your artwork. The other thing is you have to have confidence in the people you're working with. You have to have trust with your collaborators. And I actually spoke to Ryan, the director of this project, about collaborating, and here's what she had to say.
Communication, like that's the biggest thing is communication, and like being really upfront about whether it's like, hey, this is the timeline, this is what we're working with, hey, like it honestly it's like friends helping other friends. That helps a lot as well, especially with lower budgets. Bryce having this connection with the studio helps tremendously. Like we don't have to have a cost for this. Him having his own gear, like that's amazing as well. But it's communication between both of us is huge. This is your strengths, you do that, I'll just stick to this, and we can tag team it where we need, like what are we missing? So I think it's relying on your friends, relying on people that are willing and wanting to help, and then also relying on each other.
This entire project is predicated on having really solid relationships and trusting the process and trusting the people involved in that process. So I highly recommend getting in touch with your local filmmaking community, your local artists, and like your local collaborators that you know and you trust, because that's what's going to build a really great foundation for you as a creator if these are the sorts of projects that you want to start getting into. That's basically what it takes to do an entire music video in 6 hours. The music video was done by Break Bread Productions here in Nashville, Tennessee. The cinematographer was Bryce Barker and the director was Ryan Politis. All of their information is in the description below if you want to get in contact with them for your music videos. If this kind of content is interesting to you and you want to see more of this, please go ahead and subscribe. Leave a comment down below about your thoughts about the production and what you think about what Ryan said and what you think about what Bryce said, and I'll catch you in the next one.